Disclaimer, I was inspired by two different Aboriginal stories, also known as folklore, for my non-Aboriginal people listening to this story. I am an OG Cree woman who lives in Canada, so I don't want anyone trying to come for me in the comment section. I grew up with these stories. They are a part of my culture. I wondered about the Wendigo's origins, and this story is my creative result. Thank you for listening.
The soil was different, the texture, color, and smell, as was nearly everything else on this distant planet. Exploration leads to the most interesting of circumstances. I had volunteered to gather more samples of the water and plant life. The closest river had been scouted for weeks and was deemed safe. Being on a foreign planet was a constant reminder to minimize any trace left behind. The local beings are not advanced, though they may stem from us long ago. Any unnecessary engagement will corrupt their development and is forbidden. They are to find their own path without outside disturbances. I remained still where I was, listening and feeling my surroundings. Certain I felt another presence, a local. The presence grew stronger. It was not malevolent, and a fair distance away. Deeming the local as non-threatening, I carry on. Bring no harm, I think to myself, placing the new samples into my case, then assessing my surroundings. The presence grew even closer. I project a familiar image known to the area, a deer, into the being's mind, as not to startle and cause harm. It was a woman. Her energy is welcoming and warm. She's aware of her surroundings. I step back into the trees and hear her voice telling me to wait. From behind the closest tree, I held my focus on her, as the locals tend to change emotions in an instant. She waved, standing next to the river, extending her arm, which held a small plant with violet berries. Her actions were interesting. She was showing compassion to her, a seemingly untamed deer. Yet, here she stands, holding out a branch for me. She may not be a threat, but is forbidden to engage. I resumed walking away while I kept focus on her whereabouts. I hear her voice through the trees. I hoped I wouldn't scare you. Watch out for bears, my friend. Bears? There were no untamed animals near our location. Her energy still held compassion as I returned to my people. I informed the others of my encounter. They also found it interesting how she showed compassion for, in her eyes, a male deer. I was asked to collect further samples and return to the river. To avoid more locals, I was given permission to venture a little further. The same welcoming presence appeared at the very edge of my field of awareness. I continued collecting samples and made sure of what her emotions were and where she traveled. It's interesting how her energy is steady and calm, with short bursts of enjoyment, confusion with negative energy only appearing once. I fastened the collection of samples in its case as she approached closer to the area, safe in the trees. I project the deer long before I had seen her. She held a long, slender wooden branch, carved to a point in her right hand, and a basket in the other. Her humming reminded me of a piece of music from home. That is also interesting. Have they held on to certain arts after all this time? Her instant shift into curiosity is also interesting. She seems to know I'm near. She set her basket on the ground, turning her head, searching, observing her surroundings. Her curiosity shifted back into a calm and relieved state. Making eye contact with the projection, she happily waved in my direction. Satisfied knowing it was a deer who was observing her, she speaks to me. I'm going to fish here. Thank you for understanding. I'm going to fish here. Thank you for understanding, she yelled. Logically, I know she sees a deer. However, I need to ensure she only sees a deer. I open my mind to her and carefully enter hers. The past events of her life are filled with joy and happiness. She was taught understanding and respect, survive, but never take more than needed. Think 7 generations ahead before passing a law. Community-based. I am satisfied she's been seeing a deer, and now I understand why she was speaking to a deer is her showing respect to the animal who gives their life for their own. Interesting. I begin to leave as I have all I need. I hear her voice again. There's a berry bush down the river. A berry bush? I have 1 space left for another sample. However, this is too much interaction and decide against it. I'll see you again. I hear her voice carried and faded as I retreat to my people. It's admirable to have compassion for another being not of your own. I had informed the others of the one-sided interaction. Even though my efforts were appreciated, I knew they were unnecessary. I am able to intervene into another's mind without being in close proximity. I understand the first contact was to explore further, and the second was to know more. Now I know more. Why do I want to return to the river? What I had seen in her mind was a clear, simple existence. Simple and filled with kindness and love. Maybe I feel a connection because of the shared ancestry. I feel the need to stay, and my people are noticing. They have no words to say. In hope of seeing her for clarity, I return to the river. The night sky, as she experienced, was indeed beautiful. She was filled with wonder, and yet when I look to the sky, I see a long journey home. There, the same presence. She's close. Hello. You are always around this river. Is this your home? I am not able to speak. I was not given permission. The most I can do is observe. I will leave. I just need my stick, she smiled, searching the ground around her. I wish to speak, as she is close to what she is searching for. Instead of speaking, I stare at the stick when she looked at my direction. Oh, thank you, she said softly, walking towards the rocks. You are a very helpful deer. I hesitate, then slowly nod my head. She covered her mouth and stifled a laugh. Her joyous burst of energy filled my heart. You are very smart. Thank you for your help. I have to go home. I remain where I am until she fades into the forest. I'm unsure if I can bring myself to leave. The final hours are approaching. I've come to the realization. I instantly loved her as soon as I knew all of her. This is incredibly rare to love another outside our planet. I am asked to leave what I brought on board and say goodbye to my people. They understand and wish me well. I am given a strict oath to abide by while on Earth. Our interactions are brief, and I had to relocate closer to her community as the climate changed to a colder temperature. I am careful to progress with appearing to her. I can't approach her every time she is alone. It's not natural for deers. She began leaving a small pile of berries for me when I did not appear, and she's noticing I will only appear if she is alone. This was more than enough for me to approach her without suspicion. We had established a routine. She murmured a greeting and placed the berries on the grass. She was careful to caress the top of my head, between the antlers, which was either one of my hands. As her routine became normal, I periodically showed a distorted view of my form in the reflection of any still water. "Dear spirit," she whispered. Overwhelmed, she fell to her knees. It was beyond selfish of me to introduce myself so quickly. The only defense I have for my selfishness is their lives are more fleeting than on my own. What do you need me to know? With her head down, her voice quivered. I only had one message I needed her to hear, and saying it may be enough. I care for you deeply. I love you. Her complete bewilderment is overwhelming. I need to step back. Her energy told me she was struggling to meet my eyes, yet she fought against it and met my gaze. I love you too, dear spirit. Thank you for watching over me and my community. She spoke softly. Her eyes were filled with wonder as she looked into my own. I had no other words. I was speechless. My heart was overcome with relief and filled with overwhelming happiness. She knows, and so do I. Although there was a sense of relief in her understanding, the meaning was lost to her as my name is not Deer Spirit. Spirits can change their shapes, like shapeshifters? Deciding against being outright deceitful and breaking another oath, I answered, in a way. The answer satisfied her curiosity. The initial shock lingered at every encounter until she seen me as an ally, a friend. The temperature plummeted, the wind was harsh, and the trees were in hibernation. Our contact during these times were nearly non-existent. I did not need to see her physically, as I had other means. However, she did not. I felt every emotion she had: joy, anger, and frustration, every time she walked from her community toward the river and turned around as the wind blew harder before she was able to walk far. There was no wind. She had to think a storm was coming. I had to. She's fragile, and the environment is too harsh to wander far from safety. The years advanced quickly, far more quickly than I anticipated. She was aging, and I knew in time she will pass. I understood between my oath and not crossing boundaries, communicating was more than I was able to ask for. I was relieved they moved their community closer to the lake with a better environment for surviving. The advice I had given her persuaded them, as it came from the Deer Spirit. They are now able to have more food, and in my own selfish way, I can see her during the coldest temperatures. The years passed, and the trees returned to hibernation. My love was helping the much older children to fish on the frozen lake. The sun was beginning to set. A young adult with disturbing energy approached them. I feel the need to watch closer instead of remaining hidden. Why does this young adult hold so much hate? I don't believe they are a part of their community. I stood at the edge of the frozen lake. The tiny flicker of light in the distance showed the small camp being packed up. Her energy is concerned. If I come any closer, she's scared. The screams from the children pierced the air. I had an advantage of speed, not being of this world. I had only taken a few seconds from the lake's edge to the camp, running toward the fear. The children had ran from the camp. The foreign energy I see as a man. He held an arrow in his hand. My love was on her side. I can't feel her. Blood soaked the pure white snow. Do no harm. I slammed the man onto the cold ice, tearing his clothes, ripping into his flesh. What did I do? The young man. I held his heart in my hands. The blood dripped from my hands onto the ground. I dropped his heart, falling to my knees. My love. I cradled her lifeless body. How does someone do this? I don't understand. I don't understand. I scream from the excruciating agony. I feel others from her community coming. I need to leave. I need to leave. I'm sorry, my love. I'm sorry, I whispered. I was gentle to place her back where she laid. I stare at the dead man's body as I stand, and a sense of dread fills me. Her family. They need to know. They need to know beings like this evil being exist. I stand over the dead man's body, and I hold a frightening, distorted view of my dear form for her family to see. They're filled with fear, but decide to charge at me. I'm too fast for them to catch. I stay among the trees, silently grieving with her family. The hunters knew my love died by his hands. They concluded the dead man transformed into an evil being for killing an elder because he was hungry. This is the best I can do to protect the rest of you. I promise to show when evil beings are near. I promise.